Hello everyone and welcome back once again. This is your history teacher here, and this time I am here with a new chapter of NCERT Grade 8, that is Weavers, Iron Smelters and Factory Owners. Students, in this chapter we will learn that how the industrialization of Britain had a close connection with the conquest and colonization of India. Students, in the late 18th century, the company was buying goods from India and exporting them to England and Europe for making profits through sale. And with the growth of the industrial production, British industrialists began to see India as a vast market for their industrial products, and very soon manufactured goods from Britain began flooding India. And students, as a result, this badly affected Indian crafts and industries. So students, in this chapter we will learn and discover the processes of deindustrialization and industrialization in India, and we will also get an idea of the technologies of weaving and the lives of the weavers of that time. So let's start. Now students, the first heading of this chapter is Indian textiles and the world market. Students, around 1750, India was the world's largest producer of cotton textiles, and from the 16th century, European trading companies began buying Indian textiles for sale in Europe. And do you know why? Due to the fine and the renowned quality of the Indian cotton. And students, the Indian textiles were traded with the Southeast Asia, mainly with Java, Sumatra and the Penang Island, and with the West and the Central Asia. And students, European trading companies bought these cotton textiles and sold them in Europe. Now students, there is a question that how can we say that the Indian cotton textiles were very renowned and was the world's largest producer? Students, Indian textile were famous in Western market under different names such as muslin, calico, etc. And students, do you know why these Indian textiles were famous in Western market? Because the European traders first encountered fine cotton cloth from India and then carried it away by the Arab merchants in Mosul, that is present day in Iraq. And then after the Portuguese traders also came to India in search of spices. And students, along with spices, the Portuguese traders also took cotton textile back to Europe, and they called it calico because they took it away from the Calicut port. And students, like these, there are many words that pointed towards the popularity of the Indian textiles in the Western market during the 1750. And students, not only this, in fact, different varieties of cloth were named differently. Like printed cotton clothes were called as chains, koses, means khasa or bandana. Students, this word chint is derived from the Hindi word chint, means to say a small cloth with a small and colorful flowery design like this one over here. And students, due to this flowery designs over clothes, it's make a craze for the Indian cotton textiles in England and Europe. In the same way, the word bandana, derived from the word bandhana, refers to any brightly colored and printed scarf for the neck or head. Students, this bandhana clothes is generally produced through a method of tying and dyeing, and that's why it is called as bandhan. Now students, let's learn about the Indian textiles in European market. Students, as I said earlier that the Indian textiles became widely popular by the early 18th century, and it makes worried wool and silk makers in England, and that's why they began protesting against the import of Indian cotton textiles. So, as a result, in 1720, the British government enacted a law and banning the use of printed cotton textile, means to say chintz, in England, and this law termed as the Calico Act, means to say under this Calico Act the British government completely banned the import of the cotton textile from India. And students, this is the time when in England the industrialization began to develop, and that's why they wanted to secure a secure market within the country by preventing the entry of any other textile into England, and that's why it banned the Indian textile. So under the Calico Act, the calico printing industry set up under government protection, and in order to secure the England market, the Indian designs that were generally printed on cotton clothes were imitated and printed in England on white muslin or plain unbleached Indian cloth. And as the time passes, in 1764, the spinning jenny was invented by the John Kay. In the same way, in 1786, Richard Arkwright invented the steam engine, which revolutionized the cotton textile weaving in England. But students, in spite all these practices, Indian textiles dominated the world trade till the end of the 18th century. So, the European trading companies purchased the cotton and the textiles in India by importing silver due to its worldwide demand. Now students, there is a question that who were the weavers? Students, weavers often belong to communities that specializes in weaving, and their skills were passed on from one generation to the next. And students, some of the communities that were famous during that time were the Tanti weavers of Bengal, the Jilahas or Momin weavers of North India, Sale and Kakola and Devangs of South India, etc. And students, do you know, spinning is the first stage of production where charkha and the takli were generally used, and the thread was spun on this charkha and rolled on the takli, and then after spinning the thread was woven into cloth by the weavers. And students, for coloring the textiles, the thread was dyed by the dyers. And students, do you know, that time the dyers were known as rangres, means to say one who dye the cloth. And students, for printed clothes, the weavers need the assistance of the specialist block printers known as chipigas, means to say chipigas were the person who were specialized in block printing. Now students, let's understand that how the Indian textiles declined in India. Students, by the 1830s, British cotton cloth flooded Indian markets, and by the 1880s, 2/3 of all the cotton clothes worn by Indians were made of cloth produced in Britain. Secondly, exporting the Indian textiles to England also became increasingly difficult because due to very high duties that were imposed on the Indian textiles that were imported into Britain. In the same way, in Africa, America and Europe, Indian goods traditional market were ousted by English-made cotton textiles. In the same way, the English and the European countries stopped buying Indian goods and compelled weavers to write petitions to the government to help them. Students, as I said that by the 1830s, British cotton flooded Indian markets, which affected specialist weavers and spinners as well. But in India, handloom weaving continued for many years because some types of clothes couldn't be supplied by machines, like the khadi clothes that were not supplied by the machines. And that's why during that time, Sholapur in Western India and Madura in South India emerged as the important new centers of weaving in the late 19th century. And students, not only this, in fact, during the national movement Mahatma Gandhi also urged people to boycott imported textile and use hand-spun and hand-woven cloth, that is khadi. And that's why the khadi became a symbol of nationalism and the charkha represented the India. And in fact, the charkha was also put at the center of the tricolor flag of the Indian National Congress that was basically adopted in 1931. Now students, let's learn and understand that how the cotton mills come up. Students, the first cotton mill in India was set up as a spinning mill in Bombay in 1854. Afterwards, mills came up in other cities too, like Ahmedabad and Kanpur. And similarly, in Bombay, over 84 mills were established by Parsi and Gujarati businessmen by 1900. And students, that's how mills started developing in cities, and due to which the first mill in Ahmedabad was started in 1861. And as soon as these cotton mills grow, they demanded more labor. So poor peasants, artisans and agriculture laborers worked in the mills and get employment there. And students, when these textile factories established in India, they face problems such as difficulty in competing with the cheap textiles that were mainly imported from Britain. On the other hand, in many countries, the government supported the industrialization and they imposed heavy high duties on imports, which eliminated competition and protected the infant industries there. And the first major spurt in the development of cotton factory production in India was occurred during the First World War, because during that time the textile imports from the Britain declined. And as a result of the decline of the textile that were imported from the Britain, the Indian factories were called upon to produce cloth for military supplies. Now students, the next heading is the sword of Tipu Sultan and woods steel. Students, Indian woods steel, which was produced all over South India, were fascinated by the European scientists because it had an incredibly hard and sharp edge that could easily rip through the opponent's armor. And students, do you know who used this kind of sword that time? Students, the then ruler of Mysore, Tipu Sultan, used such kind of swords for war. And students, this quality of sword came from a special type of high carbon steel called woods steel that was generally produced that time all over South India. And when these woods steel used to made into swords, then it produced a very sharp edge with a flowing water pattern which came from very small carbon crystal embedded in the iron. And students, do you know this wood steel was produced in many hundreds of smelting furnaces in Mysore. And in these iron furnaces, the iron was mixed with charcoal and put inside small clay pots. And then through an intricate control of temperatures, the smelters produced steel that was used for making swords. Students, this word is an anglicized version of the Kannada word ukku and the Telugu word hukku and the Tamil and Malayalam word urukku, that means steel. And that time means to say by the mid 19th century, the wood steel making process was widely known in all over South India. But students, the wood steel making process was completely lost by the mid 19th century. And the reason behind this was that when the British conquered India, the import of iron and steel from England began to displace the iron and steel produced by the craftspeople in India. And as a result, several iron smelters lost their job and the demand for iron produced by them inevitably lowered. Now, the next heading is abandoned furnaces in villages. Students, as I said that The iron and steel from England began to displace the iron and steel produced by the craftspeople in India, and hence several iron smelters lost their job. So many iron furnaces in villages abandoned. And students, as you know, that the wood steel production require a high specialized techniques of refining iron. But in India, this iron smelting was common till the end of the 19th century. In the same way, in Bihar and the central India, every district had smelters, and students, the furnaces there means in Bihar and central India were built of clay and sun-dried rocks. But by the late 19th century, the craft of iron smelting was completely declined. And do you know why? Because the government prevented these smelters from entering the reserve forest. And in fact, the government granted to access to the forest in some areas only. But the iron smelter had to pay a very high tax to the forest department for every furnace that they used. And students, not only this, in fact, by the late 19th century, iron and steel were also imported from Britain, and it became a new competition for the iron smelters of India. And that's why most of the artisans stopped producing wood steel, and that's how several furnaces remain abandoned in the villages. Now students, let's understand that how iron and steel factories came up in India. Students, Tata Iron and Steel Company began producing steel in 1912. And do you know how? Students, in 1904, Charles Weld, an American geologist, and Dorabji Tata, the man that you see in this image is Dorabji Tata, who was the eldest son of Jamshedji Tata, traveled to Chhattisgarh in search of iron ore deposits. And students, after traveling for months, Charles Weld and Dorabji reached Chhattisgarh and found Rajhara Hills, which had one of the finest iron ores in the world. But students, this Rajhara Hills region was dry and water was not to be found nearby. So they continued their search, and in their search, the local people of the Chhattisgarh also helped them in the discovery of a source of iron ore. And then, along with the local people, Weld and Dorabji Tata cleared a large area of forest on the bank of the river Subarnarekha to set up the factory and an industrial township called Jamshedpur. And that's how the Tata and Iron Steel Company, means to say TISCO, began produce steel in 1912. And students, do you know, before TISCO, means to say Tata and Iron Steel Company, established in India in 1912, India was importing steel that was manufactured in Britain. But this situation was completely changed after the establishment of TISCO in India. And students, after the 2 years of the TISCO setup, means to say in 1914, the First World War broke out, and the steel produced in Britain had to meet the demands of war in Europe. And as you know, that the First World War continued for several years, means to say till 1918. So TISCO had to produce shells and carriage wheels for the war. And that's how the TISCO became the biggest steel industry within the British Empire. And students, in case of iron and steel, industrial expansion occurred when British imports into India declined and the market for Indian industrial goods increased. And as a result, the development of the nationalist movement and the industrial class emerged stronger, and the demand for government production became louder. Now students, that's all about your chapter number 6, and with this topic here, your chapter number 6 is completed. Now I will be come back soon with another chapter. Till then, stay home, stay safe and stay healthy.